Hey there, global listeners. If you're loving the insights we're bringing you on This Week Explained, it's time to turn this into a movement. How? Easy. Share the wisdom. Tell your friends, family, and colleagues about us. Let's make geopolitics a dinner table conversation around the world. Also, subscribe wherever you listen. Be the first to get the scoop on our latest episodes. The more subscribers we have, the louder our voice in the world of geopolitics. As well, please rate and review. Your opinion does matter to us. It's not just feedback, it's the fuel that propels us to the top, helping others discover our global community. This is not just a podcast, it's a movement. Subscribe, share, rate, and review, because together we're rewriting the narrative of global affairs. Finally, keep those ears tuned in. We've got more amazing episodes coming your way every Friday on This Week Explained. Stay informed, stay involved, and stay safe out there.
My bulky blender was such a pain to use, I ended up hardly ever using it at all. But the BlendJet 2 portable blender makes blending so easy and convenient, I use it just about every day. BlendJet 2 is portable, so you can blend up a smoothie at work, a protein shake at the gym, or even a margarita on the beach. It's small enough to fit in a cup holder, but powerful enough to blast through tough ingredients like ice and frozen fruit with ease. BlendJet 2 is whisper quiet, so you can make your morning smoothie without waking up the whole house. It lasts for 15 plus blends and recharges quickly via a USB-C cord. Best of all, BlendJet 2 cleans itself. Just blend water with a drop of soap and you're good to go. With over 30 plus colors and patterns to choose from, there's a BlendJet 2 to complement just about any style. I absolutely love the Lisa Frank edition. What are you waiting for? Go to blendjet.com and grab yours today. And be sure to use the promo code Analytics12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. No other portable blender on the market comes close to the quality, power, and innovation of BlendJet 2. They guarantee you'll love it or your money back. Blend anytime, anywhere with the BlendJet 2 portable blender. Go to blendjet.com and use the code Analytics12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. Shop today and get the best deal ever.
You are now listening to This Week Explained.
Hello, and welcome to This Week Explained, the independent geopolitical podcast that tackles all the major global events. We're glad you're here as we bring you all the insights and analysis on what's happening around the world. As always, I'm Tiana, with Kervin as my co-host. Together, we'll help you understand the complexities of our dynamic, ever-changing. We are back from our little tour of Las Vegas, Nevada for the Military Influencers Conference. Sorry about that. We won't bore you with the details right now, but if you stick with us to the end of this episode, we'll get into what happened in the conference and all the great people that we were. But for now, let's get on to what's on the agenda for this week, Kervin.
All right, we're going to start off like no one else does. Russia, Ukraine. We'll do that, and then we'll get into Israel, Hamas. So those are the two big conflicts, right? So that's why I put them at the top. Those are the first two things. But also there's a new report, this from the Washington Post, about the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage. So have we gotten closer to figuring out what entity was involved in sabotaging that pipeline?
Right.
Once we're done with that, I'm sure everybody knows what we're going to be talking about. The big meeting between the leaders of the two biggest superpowers on Earth. It's Biden and Xi met in San Francisco. We've got a lot of the details. I'll try to get through all of it. Understand there's going to be more as we move on throughout the week. To end it out, there's a new report on how China is using online disinformation to harass Americans. You know, not just Chinese.
Harass them, or like kind of get them to see their side?
This is harassment of Americans, but we'll also talk about how China's using online disinformation to get people to come over to their side.
Right. Okay. Well, let's jump right in with an update on the Russia's war in.
Yeah, a little bit of my fault on that one. trying to push that out there.
I almost said the Ohio State.
Yeah. It's a lot. The Ohio State University is a lot like Russia. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, no.
We
Yeah,
love the
take
Ohio
that
State
back.
University.
Yeah.
No, so let's see. Okay, so according to the latest reports, Russian forces launched a large-scale missile and drone strike against Ukraine, and that targeted Kiev. That was the first time they've targeted Kiev for almost 2 months now. Now, Ukrainian air defenses downed 19 Shahed drones, and that was primarily targeting frontline areas, so targeting the military, not targeting civilians. They also used a Patriot air defense system to destroy ballistic missiles that did target civilian locations in Kiev. Now, on the ground, Russian forces have recently made confirmed advances near Avdiivka.
With the global focus on the war between Israel and Hamas and the subsequent humanitarian crisis in Gaza, has there been any calls to end the fighting in Ukraine?
Honestly, yeah, there has been some private conversations between the West and Ukraine about a peace deal. These talks indicate a shift in the dynamics of the conflict. U.S. and European officials are acknowledging the challenges on the ground and honestly politically. That signals a possible recognition that what's going on in Russia and Ukraine is a military stalemate.
I mean, I want to highlight that term stalemate. Some U.S. military officials are using that term privately. What does that mean in practical terms, and why are they concerned?
Right. Thanks for framing that question that way. Now, I think all of our listeners know what a stalemate means. It suggests that neither side's making substantial progress on the battlefield. I know we said that Russian forces are advancing in Avdiivka, but no one's really making substantial gains. With concerns about Ukraine running out of forces and the ability to sustain aid from the U.S. and other Western countries, officials are facing the idea that the conflict may come down to which side can maintain a military force the longest. So if that is indeed the case, right now, Russia has the upper hand in that.
That has to be so heartbreaking for Ukrainians who didn't want this conflict to begin with, and now seeing all of, the Western aid be diverted towards Gaza, which honestly, there's a need there that needs to happen. But I mean, they're like, we're still here too, guys, but it's just...
There's still a humanitarian crisis going on in Ukraine. That is a fact.
Yeah. So U.S. President Biden seems focused on Ukraine's manpower as well, right? So how critical is this issue, and what is the current status of aid from the U.S.?
All right. Yeah, certainly manpower is at the top of the administration's concerns. Russia obviously has a much bigger military in sheer manpower. They spend more on military. But Ukraine's kind of been able to stay within the fight due to that U.S. aid because they've now been able to have more advanced weaponry, but not continue the manpower that is needed. So while the U.S. can provide that weaponry, the effectiveness depends on competent forces. Ukraine's going to need those forces. So Biden's request for additional funding right now, honestly, it faces hurdles in Congress. Congress is more worried about Israel Hamas. And there's right now, there's approximately $5 billion left for aid for Ukraine before those funds run out completely.
Due to the focus on the Israel-Hamas conflict, public support for aid to Ukraine is slipping. That's unfortunately one of the repercussions of having another huge conflict occur. That's not just me saying this. There's recent polls that are suggesting a significant drop in support. So how does this impact the geopolitical landscape?
Yeah, well, there's a reason that these countries run PR and information operation campaigns. Public sentiment is crucial. And so the decrease in support makes securing additional aid very challenging. And that's just it's not just a U.S. issue. So I'd argue Europe has more to fear of an emboldened Russia. There's a lot more national security for European countries. There should be more talk about how NATO, not just the U.S., but how NATO could offer more security guarantees to Ukraine. And that would actually incentivize Ukraine to come to the table for negotiations.
Well, speaking of negotiations, are there any indications that Putin might be ready for talks?
No, not at the moment. Putin seems to believe that he can outlast the West, or at least make the conflict so costly for the U.S. and its allies that it benefits Russia. U.S. officials are anticipating Russia targeting critical infrastructure in Ukraine again, and that's going to be this winter, shutting down, things that can warm people up. That's going to add more pressure to continue funding Ukraine. However, there's also a growing sense globally that it might be time. Now is the time for Ukraine to go to the table and consider those negotiations.
I like how now all of a sudden they're like, okay, no, we don't want to.
Yeah,
help
you're talking
anymore.
about Ukraine doesn't want to go to
no,
do negotiations?
I'm saying no, just the world stage, since it's focused on the other conflict that's going on. They're all of a sudden like, yeah, maybe y'all should just stop now.
Yeah, we're not good at multitasking.
Apparently not. Well, anyways, I'm sure there will be more on that next week. So let's get into the latest from the conflict between Israel and Hamas. So what is the latest on the ground?
Yeah, so Israel's continuing their ground offensive into Gaza, they say, to root out Hamas militant. Now, that led the IDF to Al-Shifa Hospital this week. Israeli forces claim that Hamas is using tunnels beneath that Al-Shifa hospital for its operations. The situation there escalated with a siege, and now Israeli troops have entered that hospital. They say they have, and they've shown videos and pictures of this to CNN and Reuters and Associated Press, journalists who are embedded, that they discovered weapons and a terror infrastructure underneath that hospital.
So what's the significance of this operation?
So yeah, the operation, despite Israeli claims of uncovering Hamas infrastructure, this operation has raised concerns. And it's raised concerns, rightfully so, about the fate of trapped civilians and patients.
I'm already crying, so...
Well, and the entire global community is with you, and everyone is watching. And that's especially with, reports of patients, including newborns, who are dying due to this encirclement of the hospital.
So how does this claim hold up in your analysis?
Well, like I said, recently embedded journalists with CNN and the Associated Press have reported that the IDF did show them the tunnels and the terror infrastructure. So the video evidence should be pretty damning. If you have a photo or a video of it, even in today's society where we can kind of use AI to come up with that stuff, when you're on the ground and you show a photo that you just took, that's pretty damning evidence. But let's put both sides of this. Hamas has called all of it, so this entire report, which was done by CNN, they call it propaganda. I said that the pieces of infrastructure are actually civilian communication and electronic devices that they have pulled up. They kind of didn't mention anything about their PR director, who said that those tunnels are not for civilian use and we're not here to protect civilians. We're here to defeat Israel. But Israel maintains its position. They say this is supported by its intelligence, and they assert that that hospital, Al-Shifa Hospital, is central to Hamas operations.
Okay, well, stop killing civilians too. So there's that.
I will also say that there are reports that when they did go into the hospital, there was no violence between the IDF and the civilians within the hospital.
That's because they had nothing to do with it.
Right. Well, I'm saying, because we've asked Israel to stop killing civilians.
Yeah.
They've also offered up that they will take on those civilians. They will treat the civilians medically.
Okay.
As long as they can completely annihilate Hamas.
Okay. Well, okay. But they shouldn't have taken them killing 10,000 civilians before that for them to reach this conclusion.
Only the most heartless person would disagree with you.
Okay, so, all right, I'm trying to, push it in my I can't even talk right now. The issue of a potential ceasefire is on the table, though. So what is the current stance there?
So Israel rejected those calls. They said it would benefit Hamas. And here's the way that Israel sees it. There cannot be a ceasefire while Hamas still holds hostages. If we're going to be if we are going to be consistent,
Right.
I think that the humanitarian crisis on both sides should be dealt with.
Right.
Hamas,
I agree
if
with
you
that.
want the ceasefire, let go of the hostages, return all of the hostages. The problem is there has been some video evidence that Hamas has now killed some of the hostages. And
I
if
thought
that
they already
comes to
did
light,
kill some. Are
no,
you
I mean,
talking about hostages since
yes,
the initial
yep.
the initial attack? Okay.
So within Al Shifa Hospital, Israel has said that they have found a laptop and it has shown that hostages were held there and that some of the hostages were killed by Hamas. If that is in fact proven, I don't see
A ceasefire
Israel
happening.
having a
Right.
ceasefire. That's going to
Right.
enrage Hamas even more. I mean, Israel even more.
Right.
Now, both sides of this. Israel has implemented 4-hour pauses to get civilians through that safety corridor and away from the heavy fighting. And honestly, from a practical sense, if you're talking about from a military sense, a ceasefire without the release of the hostages, that's a win for Hamas. If they can get that agreed to, they have won. They've won the IO campaign, and
Which
they've
is
basically won
also
this war.
not, and that's also not okay.
No,
Okay. So is Israel only out to get the hostages back, or is there more to this conflict than that?
listen, I think the Israeli government considers what Hamas did on October 7th, and I'm seeing a lot of people talk about this without mentioning what Hamas did on October 7th.
Right.
That is gruesome. It's just as
Right.
gruesome as anything that Israel's doing, and it makes none of it true. I'm not true. Sorry. It makes none of it right.
Right. There you go.
But they consider that an act of war.
It was an act of war.
So if
do
it's an
agree
act
with
of
that.
war,
But that doesn't mean you can go and just start killing blindly, just hoping you hit a couple like terrorists.
yeah, and like I've been saying to a lot of people, we are coming at this from a Western perspective.
Yeah, that's
So we're trying
true.
to fix a Middle East crisis through a Western perspective,
That's
and
true.
you can't do that. I mean, we could talk about it all day long, but we're not on the ground in Gaza. We don't know personally the effects that are going on. And so that's why I say, like, we can talk all day about, yeah, honestly, Israel is wrong in what they did initially when they just started bombing civilian infrastructure and then saying, well, Hamas
Is here.
lives there.
Yeah.
And Hamas was wrong to invade. They invaded Israel. If you don't consider Hamas a terrorist organization and you consider it the military wing of Gaza, which the majority of countries do, that's an invasion of a sovereign state.
Okay.
And so that sovereign state has a right to protect itself. But from a Western viewpoint, they do not have a right to kill civilians indiscriminately, to kill 1 to 2 to a dozen Hamas fighters.
Right.
So I just don't, there's no answer to this from how we're going to talk about it. And we're not here, you and I are not here to answer these questions. Like,
right.
I'm not a policymaker.
We know that we know less than nothing about what's going on over there.
Yeah. Now, my hope would be that, listen, I'll put my opinion out there. I don't think it's going to be controversial. Hamas should no longer exist. It is a terror organization. Go back to October 7th, where they wore GoPros and showed themselves parading women naked through the streets and then chopping their heads off.
Posting them like attacking grandmas in their house. And then posting it on the grandmother's actual Facebook page.
Right. That is a terrorist act.
That's gross,
and that
for sure.
Terrorist act needs to be dealt with.
Right. The people who started this, they definitely need to face consequences.
That's why I hope Hamas no longer exists as a terror organization. Listen, Hamas hasn't done anything for the people of Gaza. They really haven't. So the Hamas leaders, do you know where the Hamas leaders live right now?
Iran?
No, they don't. They don't live in Iran. They don't live in Gaza.
Well, that's why I said I didn't want to say Gaza because I knew they weren't. I knew they weren't in Gaza.
They live in Qatar. There's a recent report that they are worth $17 billion. The various leaders of Hamas are worth in the billions of dollars.
So that's why they're shielding them there?
Yep, and they are using that money to fund the war against Israel. They are not there supporting the people of Gaza.
Right.
Israel is also not there supporting the people of Gaza.
Right.
So I want, this is just me, just my opinion. Everybody can disagree with it. I don't care. I want the people of Gaza to elect a new government that is going to support their needs.
Well, first of all, their government has to hold an election, an open election, and that hasn't happened since 2008 or something.
You know why the Palestinian government does not hold an election?
We've already had this conversation. Yeah. We know they want
Hamas is going to win.
Yeah. Well,
an organization that does nothing for the people of Gaza.
Wait, you said they're not holding any elections because Hamas is automatically going to... Hold on, let me finish my question.
Okay.
So they're not holding any elections because Hamas would automatically win?
So
is that really it?
Yes, Mahmoud Abbas, who is the leader of Palestine, right?
Right.
Palestine as a whole. He's the president of Palestine, the leader of Palestine. He has canceled election before all of this happened. So he didn't cancel it recently. This happened, years ago, and actually 2021, I think an election was supposed to be held, and he canceled it because public support for Hamas was in 70% range. And he said, well, Hamas is going to win. This is a dictatorship. What I'm saying is a dictatorship.
Maybe they should, they should give people other options, though. Like, that's why Hamas is going to... The only thing they know they can vote for is Hamas, so...
Listen, let's talk about it from a U.S. perspective. How many options did we have?
Oh, God, we have, 12 more things to get through.
I know. Real quickly, though, how many options did we have in the 2020 election?
Ugh.
We had 4 options, right?
Four options?
Joe Biden, Democratic presidential nominee,
okay,
won the election. President Trump, or who was the incumbent president at the time.
Right.
Please don't anybody clip that as me saying that Trump is still president. I know he's not still president. At the time he was. That was the second choice.
Right.
Right? We had another Joe from the Libertarian Party running for president.
Yeah.
And then we had a candidate from the Green Party. That's 4, right? The options are out there. The problem is we focus on 2 factions, and this
because
is
we're
globally.
Told it's a two-party system.
Exactly. So the other options are out there. When we try to pull at those emotions, we lose those other candidates who are more moderate candidates who are actually looking to fix things, because we want somebody who is more towards our emotional feelings. And that was Biden and Trump. We had that whole issue here. And we
were Joe Jorgensen.
Yes. I mean, not to put out who we voted for, but our vote didn't even count because...
Yeah, that's another thing that sucks is our ballots weren't even counted. We
know for sure.
We know for sure they were not counted. There was some hinky things going on with it. I'm not implying anything.
No. But
they probably got
how
lost.
Do we know? We mailed it out because everybody was mailing their ballots, and we said we were also caring for a very sick person and couldn't make it to the polls. So we mailed it out, and we're in the state of Virginia, and within the state of Virginia, when you mail your ballot out, they scan it and they update you on where your ballot is,
and you can check. Yeah.
And our ballot made it to the mailbox, scanned by the USPS, and it stopped. Yep. So it was never counted. So I have no problem saying who we voted for.
Yeah, exactly. It was BS. Not that it would have helped anything, I guess, but we just didn't want to vote for the other 2. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, sorry. Not sorry.
Not sorry. Look at how
what
great
I would
things
hope
are.
is Gazans can elect a new government that's going to support their needs. Mm-hmm. And hey, by the way, why don't we try to work with Israel to establish a mutually beneficial community for all people?
Well, do you have any thoughts on which side is winning? Which feels super dirty to say, because honestly, does anyone win
No.
in a situation like this? That that's definitely an oversimplification. Maybe I should rephrase it as which side has the upper hand so far in this conflict?
Yeah, there's no winners. I'm going to agree with you there. There are no winners within Gaza. And that's what we should be focused on is the people of Gaza.
I'm about to start crying again.
I know. We're done with that. Because
No,
the
we're
sheer
not
humanitarian
done. We're not
crisis
done.
is a loss for the...
I'm not done crying. Are you kidding me? I will cry forever.
On this podcast, you are done. No, I'm just kidding. I don't tell you when you are done or not. I also, in public, don't tell you to calm down, but that's a different thing. Hey, guys, if you're listening, don't tell a woman to calm down.
Don't tell your wife to calm down.
I know from experience. But listen, you asked who's winning. Someone is winning. Who has the
upper hand? Who is the upper hand?
No, I can tell you who's winning.
Okay.
The real winner is Iran.
Ugh.
This played out beautifully for them. So we're all bickering back and forth about what Israel's doing or what Hamas is doing.
Right.
There's very little talk about how Iran's basically using proxy forces. Listen, I'm getting fired up too, and I can't. But they're using proxy forces in Yemen, Lebanon, and obviously Palestine to attack Israel. Oh, by the way, the U.S. just opened up $10 billion more for Iran to use for quote unquote humanitarian. Yes. So let me real quickly talk about that.
I hate this place.
So this is all based off of
I thought they were putting a hold on that other $6 billion that they released to them and said it has to go towards humanitarian issues, and then Iran came out and said we can use it for what we want to use it for.
And think about it like this. I think, not to plug someone else, name dropping here. Mike Baker had a very good statement about this. It's like if somebody gave you money, let's say they gave you $100, but you could only use it at Burger King for Whoppers.
I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, you would use the $100, but you would then have $100 that you would usually use for Whoppers to spend on other things. And so that's what Iran is doing is, we'll use it for humanitarian purposes. $6 billion, humanitarian purposes. Well, so what were we going to use $6 billion for humanitarian purposes originally? We can now use that to fund, nuclear advancements, things of that nature.
What is going on in our country, man?
So here's what happened.
How is it this? Ugh.
The U.S. has put sanctions on Iraqi money that has been sent to pay Iran for fuel, oil, things like that, things of that nature, to the count of $10 billion. They've opened that up to Iran for humanitarian purposes. Well, that just gives Iran $10 billion from the other funds to use for nuclear development. Now, all of this is getting the U.S. involved because they're providing equipment and money to Israel. That's depleting U.S. resources at a time when the U.S., I believe, should be stockpiling these resources because we're getting up to a war to protect Taiwan. Thank you.
Right.
Gearing up for a war to protect Taiwan.
Well, before we get to China, and there is a lot to talk about on that subject, what can you tell us about the latest report from the Washington Post about the Nord Stream sabotage from a year ago? Sorry, this is kind of an abrupt ending to the last subject. And
like we said from the beginning,
right?
I want to highlight the two major conflicts that are going on first, regardless of region. I do like to fit everything into the region because when you talk about things, you need to talk about it from a regional perspective. And that's what we try to do here. This is going to seem like a bit of a 180 from us, but I think this report is fascinating, first of all. I think it needs to be talked about.
Then talk about it.
All right, so a reminder, the Nord Stream pipeline is a vital piece of infrastructure, basically moves oil through Europe from Russian sources. So September of last year, it was attacked. We all know that. And then all sides were pointing fingers at each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Russia said it was Ukraine. The U.S. said it was Russia. Seymour Hersh said it was the CIA.
Didn't some people say it was like Sweden or Norway or something?
Yes, Sweden said that they had information that it might have been Ukraine. And then that kind of got, it couldn't have been Ukraine because we support Ukraine.
I knew one of the Scandinavian countries put their hat in the ring for
right,
who they thought. Okay.
And I would say those are more of a neutral commentary. If you look at Sweden, I know Sweden's not pro-Russia.
I wasn't trying to say one thing or the other.
No.
I just remember one of the Scandinavian countries saying, we think this person did it, or they did it, or I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember their tie to it. Yeah. I knew they were involved, or they mentioned it.
Yeah, so a little, just to reiterate that the first report, right, blamed Russia. There was a subsequent report by Seymour Hersh, a freelance journalist, and he put the blame on the CIA in tandem with Ukraine. And now the Washington Post has put the blame on a sort of Ukrainian special forces or high-ranking intelligence officer without the knowledge of the Ukrainian government. That's basically a way for the Washington Post to say, we all know Washington Post supports Ukraine in this conflict, and they're not going to put anything out there that dissuades that support. So they say, we support Ukraine. It wasn't them. This was a rogue mission. So now we can put that report out. And that leaves me very skeptical about the report since they had to make that delineation.
Well, let's not get into your even though we've had our personal opinions bleed into this several times.
I hope you guys have stayed with us to get back to you.
I mean, if you haven't, that's okay. We're not for everybody. We get it. But anyways, let's not talk about how our personal opinions and about how the media frames their reports.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the report and who was involved? And then I'm sure everyone wants to know where it falls on your scale of probability.
Sure, but I just want everybody to understand that the opinion of how the story is framed is going to be the basis for my probability score.
Okay, that's fine, but right now we should definitely just get into what was reported.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for keeping me on topic. That's why I always tell you are an important...
We're doing a terrible job today, let's be honest.
Well, it's a very, the first...
Emotionally charged,
yes. And sometimes emotion can come out, and that's perfectly fine. I said it on a recent podcast I was on.
Oh my
God. Opinions matter. No, I'm just saying opinions, your opinion, your individual opinion does matter. Don't let people tell you that that's just your opinion and it doesn't matter.
Okay.
So, the Washington Post report. This is an exclusive story to just the Washington Post. And it said that a senior Ukrainian military officer, Roman Chervinsky, is alleged to have played a key role in the bombing of the Nord Stream pipelines last year. This is the bombing that caused massive leaks, disrupted all of Europe's energy infrastructure.
Well, what do you know about Chervinsky?
He's a decorated colonel. He's got ties to Ukraine's intelligence services. Washington Post says he reportedly coordinated logistics for a team that planted explosive charges on the pipelines using a sailboat under false identities. Now, it's crucial to note that he didn't act alone. He received orders from higher-ranking Ukrainian officials. The Washington Post says he ultimately reported to General Valery Zaluzhny. That's the highest-ranking military officer in Ukraine. Chervinsky, he's actually currently held on charges unrelated to the Nord Stream pipeline.
Oh, wow.
And he denies any role in the pipeline attack. We want to put both sides of the story on there. He's denied it. Of course he would. His alleged participation, though, highlights the tensions within Ukraine's wartime government. So this is where the intelligence and military establishment operates somewhat independently from that political leadership within Zelensky.
Well, can you elaborate on his background?
Sure, he's been involved in various covert operations. These are things we know. So we talk about known knowns, facts on the ground. He's being charged for luring Russian fighters into Belarus and planning actions against pro-Russian separatist leaders. He's also lured in witnesses in the downing of MH17, the flight that we suspect Russia destroyed, a civilian flight.
Mm-hmm.
His arrest and current legal situation are linked to actually a plot to lure those Russians. It's a Russian pilot to defect with allegations of unauthorized actions. These are unauthorized actions by Chervinsky. that led to an actual Russian rocket attack on Ukraine.
Now, a lot of times when you investigate these topics, you look at it from a perspective of who has the most to gain from this event. So, what are your thoughts on who gained the most from the Nord Stream sabotage?
Yeah, well, Ukraine has a long, complicated history with Nord Stream. They've long complained that the Nord Stream pipeline allows Russia to bypass its pipes, Ukraine's pipes, depriving Kiev of significant transit revenue. Others within Ukraine argue that the attack prevented Russia from profiting from natural gas sales. It curtailed Putin's potential political leverage. So that all points to Ukraine, right? So Ukraine would have the most. But during the time frame, there was plenty of talk from Russia about no longer supplying fuel to Europe during the winter months, right? They wanted to chill out Europe, making it a long, miserable, cold winter for European citizens. So that's how Russia would benefit if they could clandestinely destroy the Nord pipeline. And so they say, well, we didn't try to take away the natural gas from you. It was blown up. Now, as for the CIA, well, they always seem to be covertly meddling in global affairs, right?
Yeah.
We know that. Come on.
Yeah.
So this is right up their alley.
Then let's get into your actual opinion. With everything you know about the event, who do you think carried out this sabotage?
Let's put it on into the, can I coin this as a phrase? The scale of plausibility. I don't know. I'll work on that. Each scenario fits on the possible scale in my analysis, so it is not unlikely that any of these entities carried out the attack, but I can't point a definitive finger at any of them. So what's interesting is that the report from the Washington Post, the details in that sound very similar to the one that the CIA allegedly carried out, according to Seymour Hersh. So that lends some credibility. So now we have multiple sources saying the same thing. What I'm saying is that divers went to the bottom, put charges on the pipeline, and blew it up. Similar in Washington Post and similar in Seymour Hersh's allegation.
And we did kind of make fun of Seymour Hersh
Yeah.
initially, so I want to say sorry.
Yeah.
If because it seems like it's kind of leaning that way. Sorry,
Definitely.
our worldview and things that color our opinions, it comes out sometimes, and that may have been. I'm not saying that's definitive, but the fact that those two reports align with each other to some degree kind of shows maybe he knew what he was talking about. But he sounded crazy back then, and
Yeah.
I apologize for just blindly, I fall prey to that quite frequently, just blindly believing one thing over the other without.
We all do, and
Yeah.
I feel like that's what we try in this podcast to show people, is that you can say, hey, my feelings came out on this.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with what I said. It's
we can go back and say sorry.
Yep. If you're the same person you were 5 years ago, you're probably wrong, right?
If you're the same person you were last week, you're probably wrong.
In this geopolitical climate, yes.
Yeah, with how everything changes so rapidly. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to
all
cut
of
you
that,
off,
and you'd agree that lends some credibility to the story.
Right. Obviously, yes, that does.
How about we put more credibility to the story?
Oh, geez.
There were reports from the Dutch that Ukraine was planning to blow up the pipeline.
Okay.
And then the U.S. had warned them, do not do it. All right, so you have all of that in place.
Right.
What I said following the attack that I saw was there were some odd Russian naval assets in the vicinity at the exact same time of the sabotage.
Okay, that does kind of swing things in another direction.
Right. So with that knowledge and knowing Russia, how did they not see a sailboat, quote unquote sailboat, with divers real close to that location? They would have, any military would have gone up and
Was
go.
this all was this all in the North Sea? It was like in the North Sea?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have been in the North Sea, and we can tell you from experience that it is crowded all the time. You see ships constantly.
And you see them. That's what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, you see them, and you pass them closely, and there's constant ships out there.
So if you're the Russian Navy and you see a sailboat,
yeah,
do you not go up to them and say, "Hey guys, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
So I don't have an answer for that.
Well, I'm just saying, like, as somebody who has been in the North Sea and traveled across the North Sea, we saw ships constantly the entire time we were there. And
Russian ships.
And we did make joke. The closer we got to Russia, my stepmom, well, she should have been my stepmom. So my stepmom, she was like, Putin's coming to get me, because she had just found out that she had Russian blood in her ancestry DNA, in her veins, and so she's like, Putin's coming to get me. He knows that I belong there. She loves America, okay? But she was also proud of her Russian lineage. So y'all shut up.
A proud Texan. So that should tell you everything you need to know.
Texas. She's proud of everything. She's like, I love this part of me, and this part of me, and this part of me, and F you if you don't.
Yep. So
I love that lady.
So all of this whole conversation is the reason why none of the reports to me go onto the probable scale.
Okay.
And so I've kept my official analysis at bay until I can get verifiable evidence that comes to light.
Because right now it's just a bunch of different people kind of releasing reports that may or may not be true.
Yep.
Okay.
Even something like the Washington Post, which is, say what you will about the Washington Post or the New York Times, and we say a lot of bad things.
Legacy
about
media,
some of them, the legacy media, but their investigations are very thorough.
Yeah, when it comes to stuff like this, they are very, very thorough. So the Washington Post article is not verified evidence, in your opinion?
No, it's not, because the details are attributed to, quote, officials in Ukraine and elsewhere in Europe.
You're right. That's super vague.
Right? Yeah. So listen to the vagueness in all of this.
Okay. Let's see.
Because that's the most direct one, right? Officials in Ukraine. That's the most direct. Listen to the next quote.
Because they name a country, right?
Yeah.
That's why. Okay. So
quote,
the rest of it is.
People knowledgeable about the details of the covert operation.
So we don't know whether or not they're part of an agency or they were just swimming with their scuba gear at that point.
Correct. And so I'm doing this. There's a purpose for how I'm framing all of this. The first one is officials in Ukraine. That's the most plausible, right? That's the most plausible. People knowledgeable
elsewhere in Europe. In Europe. So that means other people. Right.
It could. It's
Denmark,
broad, but not so broad.
Was it Denmark or Finland?
It was the
that
Dutch.
You said? Oh, the Dutch. Sorry.
Yep, the
I'm
Netherlands.
so sorry. Sorry, Netherlands. I love you, Netherlands. You're another fun place that I enjoy.
And then the most vague quote was that it was attributed to people familiar with Stravinsky's role.
That got worse as it went.
Yeah. That was very purposeful.
Okay. I appreciate the order. You're like, okay, we're going to go with the one that has the most information. Then we're going to pull back a little bit. And then we're just going to give you some bland statement.
You'll hear the first one and go, well, that doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
And then you'll hear the next one and go, that means even less. And then you'll hear the third one and go, I'm done.
Why am I here?
Yeah, because all the information is presented and it's based on statements from anonymous sources. And that's...
Well, of course, they don't want to lose their job or have their families be murdered or, there's so many things at stake. Yeah, of course, they don't want to put their names.
It's not true. Doesn't mean it's not true.
It doesn't, but it's just... I wish it were easier to believe statements like that, but I totally understand why people won't, fully throw their hats behind it unless there's a name that they can research and determine.
And we get why you don't want to be named. I understand.
We totally get it. because I still don't want my name attached to this podcast, but it's there. Sorry.
Anonymous. My anonymous
I'm
co-host.
my anonymous wife.
That's awesome. I love that one. But so the Washington Post article, as much as, and if you're listening with kids, earmuffs, as much as I shit on Seymour Hersh's article,
Yeah, we really did. Both of us did.
This article is very similar to the Seymour Hersh article.
Right.
Where it's
which
anonymous
we reported,
source.
When did we report that? It was earlier this year?
Yeah, it was, what, February, March timeframe? Because
I don't know,
think
babe.
April, Alexa O'Brien came back to talk about it.
Right. It was, yeah, it was just definitely earlier this year. And I, too, was behind you doing the same thing.
And we could be right about it.
We discredit it. I mean, the fact
because
that it aligns
me,
with it, but it aligns with the CIA stuff.
Yeah, but to me, it looks like the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos.
Oh yeah, that guy.
So it's a for-profit media organization, and I think it needed a little clickbait. Get some people to, before the holiday season, sign up.
Did they mention Seymour Hersh in
They did not,
article?
no.
That's dirty. That man did all that work, and they didn't even mention him. He's the original person who posted this stuff that we made fun of.
and Cy, he goes by Cy. I'll have you on the podcast. I will have you on the podcast. I'd
Seymour
love to talk
Hersh?
to you. Yes.
Oh my gosh, you should reach out to him and see if he'll because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I don't know. We were still
kids aren't listening anymore, so say what you want to say.
We are still super naive. We were, I don't know, still hoped that maybe people meant what they said and said what they meant. And it's amazing that it took this long for us to figure out that that's not the case.
Yeah.
But we still apologize. Like, you put in all that effort and put in all that research, and you released an article, and then people made fun of you for it. You were lambasted for it, and that's
not cool.
Cool.
We're going to stop doing that.
Yeah. So anyways, before we leave this topic, I will give you a chance to speak more about your problem with the Washington Post asserting that Zelensky and the Ukrainian government had no knowledge that this was being planned. So
yeah, I mean, I said it before. There's no secret that writers at the Washington Post, for the most part, and I don't speak in definitive terms here, it's not everybody, but for the most part, they are pro-funding Ukraine to defeat Russia. This podcast is pro that. I'm
pro that.
Not all of our listeners are, and we appreciate that.
Hey, but I feel like you need to say what you said on that podcast that you got, because it was like the perfect analogy.
Oh yeah, just talking about how.
Do you want to say it? Do you want to say it right here, or is there another place that it would be better?
No, this is fine. I mean, we are already.
It was the
50 minutes
perfect
into
analogy,
this.
and I was like really impressed with you. And I was put another baby in me right now.
Yeah. So I was asked, and it's a podcast that I really I'm a fan of, and you'll see it on our social media when it comes out. Did an interview with incredible people, and they have a different opinion than us on a lot of things. So they asked me about Vivek Ramaswamy and his recent debate comment that Russia invaded Ukraine legitimately because those Ukrainian, what we would say, quote unquote, Ukrainian cities are actually Russian cities because they speak Russian, they identify as Russians,
right,
and they have every right to be part of the Russian state. And I countered that.
And that they wanted to be part of it, and that they were being freed from the chains of Ukraine.
And when you're held at gunpoint and told to vote, you're going to vote your opinion and not what the person's telling you to vote.
Yeah.
That's an opinion of mine about what happened in those. Remember, 99% of the people voted to be annexed by Russia because it was done at gunpoint.
Right.
But they asked me what I thought about Vivek Ramaswamy and that comment, to which I said, and I don't want to be political here, and I think Vivek Ramaswamy is a CEO of multiple companies, and he understands a lot of things domestically, but his foreign policy makes me feel stupider every time he opens his mouth. And the comment was that those cities identify as being Russian, to which I countered with, go to El Paso and ask 75% of the population.
which we've been to El Paso. We also need to
Yeah,
say that
it's a border
we've been
town.
to El Paso, which we love El Paso.
And 75% of that population will identify as Mexican, as
Right.
Hispanic. It is a majority
Central American. Yeah.
Central
They just
American.
speak Spanish.
It is a majority Spanish speaking city. Does
Right.
that mean that Mexico gets to invade that area to take that back? Because honestly, they have a right to that land, right? That was Mexican
we
property
did.
before we fought a war.
Yeah.
That's why I always frame all of these as within the human standard of land. You fight a war for land, you win the war, that becomes your land. If you want
Right.
it back, you fight another war. And if you
But
invade a sovereign nation, you're wrong.
well, say what you said. Those people, obviously, they love their countries. They're grateful to have come from those countries. They will always love their countries, but they love the freedoms that come with being in America, and they don't want to be back in those countries that they came from.
No, that's why they crossed the border, right?
Yeah, that's why
So
poor people had to friggin' fight to get across the border. And so, anyways,
but according to Vivek Ramaswamy, it would justify a Mexican invasion into El Paso to reclaim that land. But those,
right.
I can tell you, knowing people from El Paso who are from Mexico and who are Hispanic, they don't want to be a part of Mexico. They have found the freedoms of the U.S. That's why they crossed the border. The same is true for those eastern portions of Ukraine that Vivek Ramaswamy thinks should just be given back to Russia.
Because they speak Russian.
Right. Because you can
still love your homeland, but still appreciate the country that you live in.
And I will say those Russian-speaking people in Donetsk and those regions in Ukraine want to be Ukraine. They do not want the oppression from Putin.
Yeah.
So going away from that,
let's move back on to, I don't know where we were.
No, I got you. We're talking about how, for the most part, Washington Post journalists are pro-funding Ukraine to defeat Russia, right?
Right.
So, in my opinion, you asked about why I'm skeptical about the report because it doesn't say Zelensky or the Ukrainian government had knowledge.
Yeah, there's no names. Right.
The journalists at the Washington Post, they're not going to want to write a piece that points the finger at Zelensky because that's going to increase the calls in the U.S., especially for stopping the funding of Ukraine's military. And I think that's why you brought up the Vivek Ramaswamy comment, because I do think we should continue to fund Ukraine because it is a national security problem.
But also, I feel like you need to say what you think Vivek. I know this is like random and it doesn't have anything to do with this question right now, but we want to say we don't completely dislike Vivek Ramaswamy.
No.
Like, because his economic stance and what's...
He's the CEO of multiple countries. His domestic...
companies.
His domestic views.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get some of his views are far right-wing.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with Nikki Haley, who said the comment of every debate. I think she should just keep saying this comment. The more Vivek Ramaswamy talks about foreign policy, the dumber we all get. But his domestic stuff is...
He gets it.
He gets the problem of your man-to-man, woman-to-woman conversation of, I just want to make money. I don't want to give all my money to all of this
the government.
But without understanding that foreign policy and geopolitical events affect your pocketbook.
Right.
So this is the problem I have with the Washington Post report. The Washington Post is not going to write a piece that points the finger at Zelensky because he wants more money. And the Washington Post says we should have more money. We should give more money to Zelensky.
Okay.
And if they do say that it was Zelensky, that's going to increase the cost to stop funding, right?
Right. I think that what's going on in Gaza right now is stopping it anyways.
Yeah. No, 100%. We are not funding, we as the United States, not me. I have sent zero money to anybody except for my
For
taxes
what? That's
to
not
support
true.
any war. I have.
I don't know. I feel like we've sent money.
Oh, we have sent money to help civilians, but I have not sent
Yeah.
any money to promote a war.
Okay. I was about to say, what are you talking about? Because we send money
Yeah,
to humanitarian. Yeah, and it's
That
not
we
the
have
Red Cross,
funded.
guys. Don't worry, we do not touch the Red Cross with a 10-foot stick. Like, no,
Mm-mm.
the Red Cross and the Salvation Army and all those people who claim to help, while their CEOs are making millions.
Right, but
Like,
you asked me about why I don't like the Washington Post report because it didn't call out Zelensky and it made a point to say that he didn't know anything about it. If he
okay,
did know, and if Ukraine did sanction that, the
yeah,
US would have to sanction Ukraine.
okay,
Ukraine committed an act of sabotage.
right.
Now, while in war, sabotage against the enemy is a lawful operation. You can do that.
But it was
If
against like the whole of
There you
Europe.
go. This sabotage affected non-combatant countries.
Yeah, it affected Germany, especially. Germany had a lot of issues.
Yeah. So if the Washington Post put out the report and said, "Hey, everybody, Travinsky carried out this sabotage at the behest of President Zelensky and the
Right.
Ukrainian government,"
That would be a problem.
I'm going to say that's a probable theory. I'm
Right.
putting that at probable.
Okay. Oh, geez. Okay.
Because of their the journalist initial worldview.
Mm-hmm.
If they're framing this opposed to their worldview, that says a lot to me.
Okay.
So that would be probable. But to say that he was commanded by some high-level general and the president of Ukraine had no idea that it was happening, that's a tough sell for me.
Yeah, I feel that as well. But okay. So it looks like we didn't completely solve the case of the pipeline sabotage, but at the same time, it still put things in different perspectives for us. So let's get to the other huge news of the week. Of course, I am talking about the meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. We briefly touched on this a few weeks back, and now it actually has happened, guys.
I know we talked about it, that it wasn't, we were like, I don't know if it's even going to happen.
Yeah, we thought something might happen. Maybe Joe would forget to take his
his meds. Sorry, guys.
I was gonna say his fiber. But
yeah, he needs it.
Hey, we all need fiber. What are you talking about?
Hey, Xi is 70. He still needs fiber too. So.
Well, so what can you tell us about that meeting? And did this meeting improve relations to possibly prevent the global war that everyone's fearing? Let's be honest.
I think you know the answer to that, but this was the geopolitical event of the week.
The geopolitical event.
I think there are 7 articles now with my name on it about this.
The fact that you keep bragging about yourself and your media presence.
No one else will. I say that this is the geopolitical event of the week. The 2 largest economies that are the biggest military adversaries get together and they talk.
Right.
That's what happened. Biden and Xi publicly acknowledged competition between the U.S. and China, but they emphasized responsible management to avoid conflict. I like that. We saw progress made on counter-narcotics efforts, try to quell the fentanyl crisis that's going on here in the U.S.
Oh, it's not going to quell anything, but okay.
I appreciate your
I'm just being
there.
like
the same as mine.
These are just words. They're not going to do anything.
Yeah. And
they aren't going to do anything.
Trying to present it as how they presented it publicly, right?
Well, I'm here to bring people back to reality because
now,
it sounds nice. They're talking about obviously the topics that are at the forefront for both countries.
Yeah.
Those were what they decided to cover, but it was just so vague. It didn't offer any actual it didn't offer any
Tangible.
solutions, any tangible solutions to these problems. They're just saying we're going to work on it. And literally thousands of people die of fentanyl overdoses every day. But that's fine, guys.
Well,
It's
one of
not
the
fine.
tangible things I will say is that they
I won't believe it.
reestablished military community.
But
That's a big
did
one.
they? Or is that just
Now, if you
them saying
remember,
it?
if you remember during the spy balloon crisis,
That was fun.
the Secretary of Defense tried to call his Chinese counterpart, and his Chinese counterpart did not answer. So the two agreed to reestablish military communication. That's big. They also agreed to address the risk of advanced AI systems. And if we are adversaries in the US, if we are adversaries to China, I think we can all be adversaries to Skynet. So,
I really hate how much we have to mention Skynet in the last few podcasts.
Because it's coming.
I hate it. You guys, we really are going in that direction, and it's very scary.
I'm trying not to get the tinfoil hat. So I haven't bought tinfoil in a long time because I'm going to wear it.
We don't buy tinfoil anymore, do we?
No, because I'm going to wear it.
Well,
stay out of my mind.
Hey, I just want to support you. If you need tinfoil, we'll buy tinfoil. It's fine.
Well, the two leaders did exchange views on their regional challenges, mainly the Indo-Pacific.
Right.
They want a free Indo-Pacific, defense of allies. Now that's kind of Taiwan is an ally to the U.S., so there is no compromise on that. And then also the commitment to human rights. Now, U.S. President Biden, raised concerns about the PRC's human rights abuses, their unfair trade policies, and the detention of American citizens in China. So that's what he wanted to bring to focus to Xi.
But it was not covered?
No, not at all.
So they just ignored it.
What they really wanted to highlight was the importance of people-to-people ties. This is something that you and I talked about offline a lot during COVID, is that we need to come, all this virtual stuff is not going to cut it. We have to have face-to-face physical communication with each other. And I think Xi and Biden agreed on that.
But they didn't address any of what Biden wanted to bring to the forefront at all.
No,
but also
they addressed climate action. That's a big one. Oh, by the way,
not a big
China
one.
doesn't care about climate.
I feel like humans and unfair trade policies, and then the detention of Americans, or something that could have been mentioned, could have been talked about.
Could have been. Well, but also the continued diplomatic efforts for their U.S.-China relations.
Okay. Well,
those are the big ones.
Okay. Well, we tried. We tried. So that is the public stuff. Do you have any information about what may have gone on behind the scenes?
Yeah. Well, one thing the media picked up that wasn't really, I guess it wasn't really, quote, behind the scenes, but it was a comment made by Joe Biden to the press after Xi had left.
Okay.
So Biden was asked,
which is easier to let your opinions be known when you do, because it's kind of like that scene in Love Actually.
Oh, I love this.
Where it's Hugh Grant, who is the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and then it's what's his name?
It is I want to say Tommy Lee Jones, but
I keep wanting to say Billy Joe, but that's not his name.
No, Billy Bob.
Billy Bob Thornton. So he's the president of America, and they have a joint press conference. And initially, Billy Bob Thornton comes out and he says all his American things he's going to say when he's in this press conference with the Prime Minister of Great Britain. But then good old Hugh Grant comes in and swoops in and chastises, but doesn't directly chastise. Like the language is very flowery, but it still puts him to keel.
So what's funny about that, because you don't know about this.
No, I don't.
So I'm going to tell you about this.
I don't know about anything.
Because I said I had made comments to journalists about the meeting.
Yeah.
And this quote wasn't used in one of the articles, the 5 articles that was used. But I
Oh
did
my God,
mention,
dude.
I did
You are
mention,
bragging about yourself so much today.
no, I'm saying all of that to tell you that I did say that the meeting between Biden and Xi, to have, let's say, to have either one of those make a huge statement that changes the entire trajectory of geopolitics would not
Okay.
happen. And it would be on the same. I brought up that exact Love Actually scene to the person who was asking me,
Oh,
because
really?
yeah, so
We're
I find it
soulmates, I think.
hilarious that you bring that up.
I did like that's weird because we have not talked about that.
No,
I
and it
would.
wasn't
I'm
put
high
in any of the
fiving.
articles.
I'm high fiving you through the camera.
But what I said was that works for drama, and you understand this. It's very
Yeah.
dramatic. It works for drama, but it would not hold up in the court of public opinion because there's so much nuance going on the global sphere
Right.
that you know, the Hugh Grant character would have been chastised by half of a population, and then he would have been praised by the other
America would
half.
have been like, yeah, even though he was perfectly in his right to
Yeah.
say that. Okay.
But we
So
did have a
anyways.
comment from Joe
Oh,
Biden.
okay.
He was asked by the U.S. media if he still considers Xi as a dictator,
Yeah.
and he did reiterate his assertion that since Xi is the unopposed leader of a communist nation, he is still classified to Biden as a dictator.
Well, I know that didn't play well in China.
Yeah, it's
I'm like that.
It did not.
Of course, it
And
didn't play well in China.
and the Chinese media did run with it.
But also, do you remember what the comment was that Xi said that was the most vague
Yep,
comment ever?
I do. I'll paraphrase it here.
Okay, yeah, you're gonna. It was the most non-comment I've ever heard from a leader after meeting with another country's leader. It was the most non-comment.
Yeah, and I believe it was, so Xi was the vice president of China at the time.
Yeah.
And everyone expected Xi to become the president. And so this was 12 years ago. Biden met with Xi as the vice president of the United States.
12 years ago? Oh my God.
No one expected Biden to be the president of the United States. Now they get to meet.
No one wanted it. Well, actually, people wanted it, but I didn't want it.
But the two met 12 years ago.
Okay.
And they discussed that. They said, oh, look, we met 12 years ago, and Xi kind of made the comment of, framing this from the knowledge that Biden is 80 plus years old, and he doesn't have all of his mental acuity. Is that a good term for it?
Why is he our leader?
Right.
Okay.
I felt that this comment was a jab at Biden's mental acuity.
Well, it probably was.
And he said, I remember that meeting 12 years ago. This is his quote. I do remember it now. This is not paraphrasing.
Okay.
I remember our meeting 12 years ago. I have a lot of thoughts about that meeting, leading me to believe that's a dig at Biden, saying, Xi says, I actually remember our meeting. I don't think you do, but I do. And I have a lot of thoughts about that meeting, which is very vague. What are your thoughts about that meeting? I would assume his thoughts were, this is a crazy person. And
he knew that was going to stir the pot. And that's why he left it that way. But anyways, I didn't realize that it was a quote about him reflecting on his first meeting with Biden 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Which the fact that you just said 12 years ago, that's a problem for me because I feel like I am like 15. So
we are
mentally, definitely, actually.
But you asked how?
Yeah.
You didn't ask. You said
I just remember that quote
that it didn't play well in China.
Right.
Now, even during the talks, Xi told Biden that the Communist Party actually gets an unfair negative view within the United States.
Okay, well, Xi is not wrong. at least during our childhood, the communist and socialist political regimes worldwide were definitely vilified.
Oh, yeah.
And it also looks like Biden is continuing that rhetoric. Do you think, even after those comments by Biden, that this meeting was a success and we could possibly see improved relations?
I don't think that there was any hope that this meeting would provide a breakthrough in relations. I do believe it was a moment to gauge how both leaders view each other. So nothing that I've read jumps out as a key moment to improve relations. As for the agreement on the fentanyl crisis, actions are going to speak louder than words there. Now, what I'm saying is, if China actually quells the fentanyl crisis, then I think we should have better relations because actions speak louder than words. Now, what I think will prevent a preemptive conflict is actually that restart of those military to military communications.
Can you explain why that's important?
Yeah, so the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, that's the Chinese military, and the US military have for years been in a standoff in the Indo-Pacific. Every month there are air-to-air intercepts. That's to the tune of 180 air-to-air intercepts in the last 2 years, more than a decade's worth of intercepts. Having military to military communications can prevent a mishap or even a miscommunication at sea, causing an international incident. So, if the phones are truly open, that's a good sign.
Well, I know there will be more about this meeting as more information is released, and the Need to Know newsletter will have a full analysis, correct?
Yeah, it's going to be.
Let's talk about ourselves for a minute.
But that is what the whole newsletter is going to be about. So Monday morning, your inbox will be filled with all the details. But it's also going to be filled with what it means for future relations.
So definitely sign up for that if you feel led to.
Definitely.
You can go into the show notes and click the link to sign up. But sticking to the talk about the Chinese Communist Party, a recent report detailed how China is using the world's largest known online disinformation campaign to harass, I'm putting that in quotes, harass Americans. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, look, so it's not just about harassing Americans. It's about changing the opinion of Americans. You asked that at the beginning of the podcast. Also, don't let me forget about the latest trend on TikTok, which the Chinese Communist Party is manipulating to win hearts and minds for terrorism.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's start with the harassment campaign first. But I do want to get into that trend you were talking about at the end of this. Start by explaining the disinformation campaign, how it is harassing Americans, and then maybe you can shed light on how Americans can protect themselves from these misinformation campaigns.
Yeah, so the
I just said campaign.
Yeah, well, the disinformation campaign is known as spamiflage. So campaign, that could fall into it. I think it's known more in China as Dragon Bridge. It represents a systematic effort to harass Americans, actual, not just Chinese dissidents, but Americans.
So not just like Chinese nationals that are here or no. Okay. So it's literally just about misinforming people in America.
Yeah, the operation involves hundreds of thousands of social media accounts.
Okay.
Across all the major platforms, aiming to intimidate and discredit U.S. residents, politicians, and businesses, not Chinese dissidents. The attacks are highly personal. They're highly malicious. They include threats of violence, character assassinations, and it's through tens of thousands of social media posts. So the intent is to induce fear and paranoia. The victims, from journalists to pro-democracy activists, have been subjected to insults, racist and homophobic slurs, even cartoons meant to demean and intimidate. The harassment even extends beyond the social media realm, with some individuals reporting offline threats. This indicates a coordinated effort to silence dissenting voices against China and instill a constant sense of fear.
And if someone was dealing with these obvious troll-like threats, what can they do to combat it or protect themselves and their families? Because we know that is an issue.
Yeah, no, so that's a great question. There's plenty that someone can do. Now remember, you're not alone. I get that if you put something out and then there are hundreds of people that attack you, you're not alone. And the quicker you can identify the personal attacks that they are part of this quote unquote spamouflage, the easier it is to combat it. So, as always, first of all, stay informed about disinformation tactics. Listen to us. We'll put those out there. And then be critical of the information that you encounter online. First of all, we say this every week, verify the sources and cross-check information before accepting it as true.
Even from us.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know everything. We're just reporting from the sources that we know, but maybe you find another source. And
right. It goes back to your opinion does matter. And if you take both sides, competing sides of a topic and form your own opinion, that is where you stand. And I appreciate that. But when you verify the sources, you cross-check the information, include, like Tiana said, including what we're saying, that's going to protect you if you're being attacked. It can also come in handy if you're trying to defend someone who is being attacked.
Yeah, so that is one that our audience is very familiar with. What about their actual social media accounts? What should people be looking for?
This is it's especially true.
Did you just say especially?
Yeah, there's an X there.
No, there is not, sir. I do not agree with that.
I've been talking all day today. Sorry, guys. It's especially true for LinkedIn accounts. So if you have a LinkedIn account, please listen. I say regularly review and update your privacy settings on, I said LinkedIn, but all social media platforms. Be cautious about accepting friend requests or actually engaging with suspicious accounts. Tiana, you're very good at that.
You won't find me anywhere.
Yep. Everything's on private, and if you actually add her, she is going to go look at your background, and she has a husband that is very good at identifying where you're at.
I literally don't add anyone unless I've known you for a couple years, so sorry.
Well, you have also shown me accounts that say that they are military and have had me cross-reference what they are saying with the fact that they're not really military. They're actually a Chinese bot looking to get information.
Well, I mean, I wasn't going to add somebody I didn't know. It's just mainly just look at this person who tried to add me and they're lying to my face.
and as you know, there are a lot of Chinese and Russian bot accounts.
I mean, I don't know what bot accounts they were. I just knew that, I don't know. It's weird whenever it's literally like an old looking dude and then a bunch of young women that he's added. And I just want to be like, you're wrong adding me. I am not a young woman anymore. I am middle-aged.
But you understand that those accounts are trying to obtain information from you or corporations.
Have fun. I have like nothing on my Instagram page.
But some of our listeners might have these accounts come in, even though they say, well, I'm just some low-level employee.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that I was doing anything better than anybody. I'm just very private. I don't like...
I think everybody should be that way. I think
that
in the
it
future...
doesn't matter. Like, some people enjoy putting their lives out there, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not my thing. And also, I know my life is not that interesting.
Well, you say that. So I love that you just said that. You said, well, my life's not interesting. And
no,
I feel
I don't want to talk about like the intel perspective. Of course,
no.
They'll be able to pull information from, but they're not pulling information from my life for anything about me. It's literally, if they're pulling information from my life, it's because they're trying to get to you, not me.
But you could be a low-level employee and say, no one cares about what I know. But you might be privy
Are you aligning me with low-level employees?
Not
like
you.
People that clean up crap? I do that, but F
I am not
F you.
aligning you with that.
No, that's exactly what you just did, and I don't
What
think I
I'm
can
trying
talk
to
to you.
say is that
No, you're done. You are done.
some people may think I don't have any there's no information that the Chinese government could get from me. But you may have some proprietary information that you don't understand you have.
No, I do understand that from my life in Homa.
Well, your dad did know a Chinese spy. So
yeah, he was was he the tennis or golf?
Yep, the
pro?
tennis.
I can't remember. I don't know. I just remember my dad being like, he was so nice. I don't understand because it was like a big thing in Homa when he got arrested for spying for China.
Yeah. And that's what a spy wants you to know.
I don't understand. I don't understand. I'm like, Dad, it's okay.
So while you think you may not have proprietary information, you actually do. Just these, like, it's not.
It's a good thing I don't talk to anybody ever.
I would say don't talk to anybody you don't know.
But at the same time, like a lot of these people are playing the long game.
Yeah.
So they recognize that people might be a little standoffish, may not want to open up to them, and they are there to kind of butter you up.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's what it's looking for. So
I'm
what
really
I'm saying is,
I'm really bad at like.
Well, all I'm saying is, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who think I don't have any knowledge that the Chinese government or the Russian government or Iran, any of adversaries would want to have.
Right.
But it's not the fact that you personally have information. It's the fact that if I can get a little bit of information from you
to
and
lead
a little
you to the person who does
Right.
have the information. Right.
Yes, and this is something that investigators do for clearances. When in the US you want to have a clearance, you give
I've
so you have
talked
to
to a total of 4 people maybe.
Right, because you're my wife. And so I would put you at the top of my list of people to go talk to.
Right? Oh, right. Okay.
They're not going to go talk to you and try to get information about you. They're going to talk to you and say, "Who else do you know?"
This is such a long episode, and we're so sorry. But at the same time, it needs to be talked about. If you have to listen to it in bits, we totally get it.
Please do. Yeah. So what I'm just saying there is that it's not. So during my investigation for a clearance, it's not about the personal people that I interact with, that first level personal relationships that have.
I've never been interviewed for you.
They have come to the house. No, they have come to the house. You told me about this.
No, I've been interviewed for my friends' husbands, but I've never been interviewed for you.
Our oldest has had their teacher interviewed about me.
No, I didn't remember that.
Yeah, while I was in Afghanistan. That's why my clearance had sort of a discrepancy, because I was in Afghanistan. And
I don't remember a teacher being interviewed. I've been interviewed one time for somebody else's husband.
That's what they want. Because they don't care about your friends. They care about your friends' friends. That's who's really going to tell them who. That's really going to tell them who you are.
Okay, this went off on a tangent.
Yep.
And we're sorry about that. Sorry. Most things
but it's important.
Go off on okay. Well, we need to bring it back because we have literally a lot to get through.
Yeah.
What if people feel overwhelmed? Can they go to law enforcement, or is that a bit too far for online harassment, even if it seems like it is being directed by a government entity?
I mean, if it's just a one-off, like bot account friend request, I would suggest reporting that account. Don't engage with it. Do not accept it, obviously.
Right. I'm very good at not accepting friends requests from people I don't know.
But if you're facing severe threats or harassment, definitely reach out to law enforcement agencies within your own country. We have the FBI. Other countries have their own.
So MI whatever.
Right. MI whatever.
I don't know. I don't know what the numbers mean, so I didn't want to just put a number out there and then be like, that's an interstate, stupid.
You could talk to Interpol, right? That's European. I would suggest screenshotting every interaction, and then you
Okay.
give that law enforcement agency those interactions with the account. But I want to reiterate: do not engage with that account.
Well, thank you for that advice. But now I want to get into this trend you have identified where people are starting to change their tune on terrorism.
Yeah, so
Like, terrorism did exist, guys. Sorry.
This has been an ongoing effort by the Chinese Communist Party to increase anti-Western sentiment. We've seen it in Africa. We've seen it in various
And
European.
It's working.
Oh, it is. It's working,
especially with the younger generations.
Yeah,
who weren't there, who weren't present for a lot of the stuff that we went through. And this particular one stems from Bin Laden's letter to America following the attacks on September 11th. So this is 2002. I want to say that we are ushering in a generation. We know we have children. Yeah.
We are ushering in a generation.
All of our babies were born post 9/11.
Yeah. And they have no firsthand accounts of 9/11. We do. You and I do.
It's very like Vietnam vet kind of thing.
Yeah, we don't understand Vietnam, right?
We don't understand Vietnam.
You and I don't.
No, we don't, but we appreciate the fact that almost everyone there, they were drafted. They had no choice. They lived in a free country, and it was the country's right to draft the young men there, even if they didn't agree with what was happening. And it was heartbreaking whenever they came back from that war that didn't need to happen, and it shouldn't have happened because it didn't freaking result in anything.
Right.
Like, they were torn apart by people, ripped to shreds. We actually met somebody at
Piccadilly,
which I don't know how many people know what Piccadilly is, but it's like a southern cafeteria style restaurant that I grew up with and Kervin grew up with, and I have a lot of really wonderful memories about it. And I haven't been to one in I don't even know how long. 10 years at least. It's been a really long time. All I know is that my parents loved the place. My second parents loved the place. We found one of the only, it was in a very scary closed down mall, but it was so delicious. Anyways, what I'm getting to is the man behind us, he was a Vietnam veteran, and he kept thanking Kervin for his service over and over again, because I don't know how he knew that Kervin was in the military or anything. He didn't talk about himself until we started
my haircut
asking.
and my mustache.
So okay, that may have been what it was, but we immediately started asking him about himself, and he's like, yeah, I'm a Vietnam veteran. And you could see him kind of pulling back, knowing that that is a divisive issue for a lot of people. But he didn't want to be there. He had to be there. Like, why aren't people taking that into consideration? Whether or not he wanted to be there or not, he was drafted. That's what a freaking draft is. And so...
And that's like part and parcel of communist...
Yeah.
Like what the communists were trying to push within the American government was that this was an ill-fated war. It should have never happened. And you can still, you can believe that and not be opposed to U.S. anything. There's a lot of people who are opposed. But what we're trying to say is being opposed to people who were drafted into it, who had no say in the situation.
No say. They were literally forced by their governments to be there.
And that's like kind of like the difference between the what's called the greatest generation, the World War II veterans.
Unless you were Joel Kinnaman's father, who ran to Sweden. Which, you know what? Good for him doing what he had to do, I guess. He didn't agree with the the conflict, and instead of staying in the country and feeding off that country, he went to another country.
Yep.
I know y'all don't know that, but I know that because one of our kids used to be super obsessed with Joel Kinnaman. I'm not going to say who, but they were obsessed with Joel Kinnaman, and they knew all this information.
But yeah, so all I wanted to say was don't engage with the account, don't interact with the account, and also,
oh my god, this is going to be such a long episode.
oh, it's already a long episode. But
I know.
this week's, I mean, this is 2 weeks, so we didn't put out an episode last week, so we're
That's
kind
true. We're combining 2 episodes.
combining 2 weeks, yeah.
Well, let's get into this trend you have identified where people are starting to change their tune on terrorism.
Yeah, so this has been an ongoing effort by the Chinese Communist Party to increase anti-Western sentiment. So what I'm talking about stems from bin Laden's quote-unquote letter to America following the attacks on September 11th. Now, I do want to say that we globally are ushering in a generation without the firsthand accounts of 9/11, those attacks.
All of our babies are our baby, like the people who experienced 9/11, their babies were born after that.
Yeah, of course.
And our babies are now reaching adulthood.
Yeah, so the impact of the event has waned in recent years.
Right.
And this,
which is usually what happens.
Yeah, it is what happens. And this is coupled with anti-colonialism campaigns we've seen in Africa.
Right.
And they've really had an impact on how people feel about the quote-unquote West, and it's impacting how people perceive terrorism.
Well, why do you believe that it is the CCP that is leading this campaign and that it is not just some organic change of heart? Because I've seen an organic change amongst younger generations, which I'm grateful for, to be honest.
As I always say, 2 things can be true at the same time.
Okay.
And so I think one actually leads to the other. What I mean is, let me start with the CCP question. This all started through some known bot accounts on TikTok and Twitter, or X as it's being called now. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter.
Yeah.
As we know, that's also going to bleed into old people TikTok, as it's known by us as Instagram. What's interesting to me is I started seeing the trend in talks about the war between Israel and Hamas. There's a flood of accounts that promote resist through violence, this mantra that's justifying what Hamas did on October 7th, because violence is the only way to succeed in taking down that evil Israeli occupation, to resist by violence. And so while the way the attack was carried out may be gruesome, it's justified because Israel and the West is bad.
Right.
So what I'm talking about are the conversations asking for peace and the stop to the humanitarian crisis, the protection of civilians. That's something we all need to get behind. But the reason, so yes, it says resist through violence, but I think we should come to a peaceful negotiation between both Israel and Palestine, try to find a solution to protect civilians, right? But the reason I say 2 things can be true here is when you are inundated with this content every single day, one-sided content, which on TikTok, China is promoting a one-sided content, your opinion may shift. Your personal opinion may shift. And so it may seem like this is an organic shift to your opinion. So then an individual starts posting that same content that they're seeing, and then it becomes a viral moment.
And that is what you think's happening here? I still don't get how you are equating this to a change in opinion on terrorism. I mean, maybe people just have a different view on what terrorism is.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's true. People have different opinions. If you were to ask a Palestinian about terror attacks, they'd point out the terror being inflicted by the IDF, right? But in this instance, we're talking about the 9/11 attacks and a letter to America published in 2002. 11 years ago.
And that's the last time it was posted, right?
Yeah. It was not published.
11 years ago? What are you talking about? Our
2002?
Our daughter is 19 years old and born in 2004.
Yeah, she's older than 11. Oh, I'm sorry. 19 years ago.
What the heck are you? What do you mean 19 years ago?
2002 minus 2023 is 19.
I don't agree with your math.
Or is it 21?
Ever.
I don't know. I'm not doing math here.
I don't agree with your math already because you're just.
But we're in 2023.
Yeah.
This was published in 2002.
Our daughter was born in 2004.
She's 19. This is 21 years ago.
Yeah. So you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, my math is wrong.
Fix your math, buddy.
Yep. But it was not republished by The Guardian, so it stayed at 2002. And they also did take it down within the last 3 days because of the content that's being produced.
So what content are you talking about? Because I know you aren't on TikTok, and I don't even think you scrape information from TikTok because you feel as though it is another media arm of the CCP.
Yeah, you're right. I don't. But this was picked up by other social media accounts. And so what's happening here is even those within the U.S. are creating content that says the U.S. actually deserved to be attacked because the U.S. is the great evil. Resistance by all means is justified due to colonial. These are their words that they're saying on these videos.
Well,
the resistance by all means, violent means, is justified due to colonialism pressing its thumb on emerging economies in the global south. The reason I think it parallels some content about Israel-Palestine is that people have jumped on a few quotes from the letter. One being, this is a quote from bin Laden's letter. You continue to support the oppressive Israelis in their occupation of our Palestine in response to pressures on your administration by a Jewish lobby backed by enormous financial capabilities. That's an exact quote from the letter.
Okay, so how do you know it is successful, though? It could be a couple accounts having an existential crisis and taking to TikTok to express it. But at the same time, like, they have a right to have emotions too.
You're right. But and it very well could be.
Okay.
That all of these accounts are just having an existential crisis. This is organic. But this has now transcended TikTok, made its way to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Every video explains the exact same crisis. How the letter changed their entire view of the U.S., the war on terror. It's all framed by what's happening in Gaza right now. That's how they're framing it. And it isn't just like a couple of accounts. These are thousands of people who have posted similar reaction videos across all social media platforms. What's interesting is that each video uses very similar terminology. That terminology is, these are quotes from multiple accounts. I read the letter and I am going through an existential crisis. That's the exact quote that every single account uses.
I feel like that's people normally.
Yeah, well, what's concerning to me is we've reached the pendulum swing from, remember we said never forget?
Yeah.
That's sort of that was a Jewish mantra of the Holocaust, right?
Was never that forget. A Jewish mantra? I just thought it was like,
yep,
what?
From the Jews after the Holocaust, they said never forget. Do not forget. We use the same one for 9/11. Do not forget what happened.
Do you think that was on purpose or?
It might have been. It was definitely, it was not definitely, but it was probably.
I mean, our governments are all here to manipulate us. So, right. I mean, that makes sense.
That's what these accounts are saying, that the pendulum, okay. and so the pendulum swing from
I haven't forgotten.
Never forget. Now what's going on is we justify the violence against even my own people, the American people, the Jewish people, based on a history of grievances.
Right. So do you really think that U.S. citizens are okay with another 9/11 style attack on U.S. soil?
I mean, yeah. I mean, we just said, like, according to these videos, I think that U.S. citizens are okay. But that's why I wanted to highlight the ushering in of this new generation. They weren't personally impacted.
And it was was terrible, though.
Yep, we sat in class, right? In school. I had already decided to join the military.
Which is wild because I literally thought you joined the military because of the attacks.
No, it was part of the reason why my mom was like, do not join.
Well, of course, I would have been that way too.
Yeah.
Fifi, I agree with you. I would have been that way too. Don't join. I love you. Stay here. Like, of course.
Yeah, those attacks made it very real that we as U.S. citizens aren't always safe.
Yeah.
I would say it's a misstep for any group to carry out a major attack on U.S. soil. This new generation will change its tune very quickly if you attack U.S. soil. It's very similar to what's happening in Poland right now. There's this older generation of Poles that are very worried about the Soviets ushering in a new communist regime because they remember how terrible things were before the 90s. But what I wanted to say was the newer generation in Poland, the younger generation, they have a more positive view of communism because it hasn't directly impacted.
But I feel like it has because it's still been going on.
But personally, it has not affected them. They see like bread lines and things like that as something that's beneficial.
Oh gosh,
because they have not had to stand in a bread line
to
get food.
Right. Okay.
So that's why I said they're not directly impacted by it.
Okay, so you really think that an attack on U.S. soil will change opinions and that we won't see more of this, the U.S. deserved it rhetoric?
I think my personal opinion is adversaries of the U.S. are hoping to change the narrative so much that it won't matter. And so an attack is going to lead to the fall of the United States. But like I said, that's going to be a misstep.
I love how hopeful this is. This is like so hopeful.
They're hopeful.
Like we're in the downfall of our country, according to you.
We're
in the midst of that.
Not just me. But I do say that would be a misstep because there's a difference in saying, we talk about this all the time. You and I have discussed this offline all the time. There's a difference in saying how you're going to react during an event and then the way you actually react in that situation. So I honestly never thought I'd have to say this out loud, unsarcastically, but terrorism is bad, okay? It's indiscriminate. It doesn't care if you agree with the cause. It says you are evil based solely on where you are living.
And it's mainly about your religion, though.
It is. And if you take religion out of it, maybe we can solve some of these problems. But I don't know that any of those accounts would see the death of their friends and family as gods. That's true.
They love their gods. And, that's the whole point, is you're supposed to love your God. So
I do think, though, that they love their friends and family more. And if they see the death of their friends and family, they're not going to consider that as a warranted attack.
So you think this is all because the people from these accounts have not been personally affected?
Yeah, I have no doubt that that's the case. It would happen to you and me. I was never affected by that. So maybe we have a different opinion.
It's going to be weird when we start bringing up things that didn't actually affect us, like the first Gulf War. I mean, my uncle was in the first Gulf War. Don't get me wrong.
Well, look at the Vietnam War. That did not personally affect us, right? You and me.
Well, I had a lot of friends whose dads were part of the Vietnam War, and they were treated horribly, which I friggin' hate because they didn't want to be there. They were told they had to be there. And even if they wanted to be there, it didn't matter. Like, they were friggin' drafted out there, buddies.
Yeah, and so
hateful. That's part of what happens when you live in a country like this.
But
okay, sorry.
I also think that you could find a few of those accounts of people who were affected personally by it,
right?
And they have the same idea.
Of course, litters.
Yeah, that's the exception.
But it's like,
that's not the rule. And look, I'm not going to keep my opinion to myself on this.
Of course not.
If you read Bin Laden's letter, and a lot of these accounts are pro-LGBTQ accounts, and they're allies. In the letter, it says that homosexuality is one of the deviances of the West.
So y'all read the whole letter.
Read the whole letter.
If you're going to support something, you need to read the entire document. You can't take parts of the document and force it to fit your narrative. It's got to be the entire document.
Yep.
Because
you're feeding into propaganda.
Yes.
It's similar to me if someone would, they would say, listen, Hitler, he was the worst. But you know what? Mein Kampf, that really had some great ideas.
That made sense. No.
That's ridiculous.
No.
It makes me want to never use social media again. That's what all this does.
Oh, I'm sure they're so sad that you're going to leave social media.
1%, right? But it's being weaponized.
Well, I'm sorry for this abrupt change, but thank you, Kervin. Is that all for this week?
Yeah, I know we were supposed to try to get into the Military Influencers Conference. We're going to have to do that at a different time because we're almost 2 hours into this. So.
Oh, my geez.
Unless you had anything more to add, I'm done.
No. Thank you so much for listening to our tiny little humble geopolitical podcast. We hope you found it both informative and engaging. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, please let us know. And if you would like in-depth coverage of these stories and more, follow us on Instagram at Oakland Analytics.
Tiana, thank you so much. And until next week, stay safe out there.